Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Afternoon. We'll just let people come in, but we'll just make sure to introduce the session right now as well. So yeah, thank you to everybody who has joined us so far. This is our third session of the SABIA Biogas Workshop Series. This one is titled Unlocking Biogas Financing, and we've got two great presenters who will be giving you some very in-depth presentations. Hopefully you can take something valuable away from them. So my name is Tusang Moyo. I'm the manager of SABIA's Center of Excellence. And for this workshop, it will go as follows. We'll just make sure to introduce each speaker before they go up. And while they present, just make sure to note any questions that you may have, either in the chat or in the notepad. And then after both speakers have done their presentations, we will just instantly have a Q&A session at the end. Hopefully we can do about 30 minutes. So please do note anything. I'll also be in the chat box, just reading your questions as we go along. And also, just so you know, this session is being recorded and will be going on YouTube. So to anybody who would want to subscribe, I've put the link to our YouTube page in the chat box. So please, if you would also like to watch any of the previous recordings, if you missed any, you can just follow that link and subscribe and just get up to date. So yes, thank you. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Hopefully we have a very nice, productive session. I see people are still rolling in, but we'll just get things started and they can meet us along the way. So without any further ado, let me introduce our first speaker. So our first speaker is John Campbell-Copp, the Chief Technical Officer at Climate Fund Managers, or CFM, which is a blended finance, and he's a blended finance investment manager with over $2 billion currently under management and a target of mobilizing an additional $6 billion. At CFM, John is responsible for overseeing the technical and implementation risks across a portfolio that spans renewable energy, green hydrogen, water, and climate-resilient infrastructure across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But before CFM, John worked with Mott McDonald in South Africa, advertising lenders and project developers on more than 1.5 gigawatts of renewable power projections. And earlier in his career, he originated over 150 megawatts of wind energy projects in Scotland. He brings a deep expertise in both project development and investment risk management. Everybody, please welcome Mr. John Campbell-Copp. Thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
No, thank you very much, Tusang. And yeah, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to present today. As Tusang said, I'm from Climate Fund Managers. We are a fund manager that manages several funds that look to mobilize finance for climate impact. So that's both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. I sit on our technical and engineering team, and we advise our investment teams with regard to the assets that we choose to invest in. And I've been invited today to speak around mobilizing finance. And I'll preface this by saying I'm not a finance person, but I've been around the finance world now for some years, and in that sort of technical commercial space between. So that's where I'll focus my comments today. In terms of the agenda, I'll take you a bit just briefly through who we are as climate fund managers and the different funds that we manage. Actually, I'll pause. Can everyone see my screen? Sure.
Yes, John, we can see. No worries. Okay. Yeah.
All right. From there, I'll speak briefly around what our experience is in terms of waste energy. I won't dive too deep into any projects, but we'll move quite quickly onto these points around observations that I've made, and I won't pretend to be the exclusive expert here, so it would be really interesting in the Q&A session if others have different opinions or different experiences in terms of where they've overcome challenges, but mainly putting on a lens here of if you are looking to get projects financed, what are some of the hurdles you may encounter, and some possible ideas to get over those hurdles. And then finally, I'll soapbox a little bit and talk a little bit about my lessons learned and also some that I've heard from others within the industry. So in terms of who we are as climate fund managers, we are a Dutch-based fund manager. But we have offices in the three main regions that we operate in. So Asia, Africa, and Latin America. We have a team of around 120 and growing now. We began in 2015. And began really with the mission to bring the blended finance mechanism into providing the blended finance approach to funding projects in climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And our first foray into that was Climate Investor One, which is just under $1 billion US. So that's focused on wind, hydro, and solar projects. Climate Investor 2 followed thereafter, which has a water, waste, and sanitation focus. And we have several other funds which are not yet closed, which we're still fundraising for. But as you can see, have a thread following quite closely the sustainability goals of the UN, and that's really where we were born out of, is essentially attempt to bring climate finance to projects that weren't getting that money. In terms of our goals, what we're looking to do, these are our aspirations in terms of emissions reduced, people reached, and also biodiversity impacted. And then in terms of what we've done so far, so starting with Climate Investor One, and maybe just to back up a bit, in terms of each of our funds, within each there's two sub-funds. So one is a development fund, which provides funding to projects prior to financial close. For those who have worked in projects, you'll know this is a very challenging time for a project in terms of having sufficient money to be able to fund all the activities during development to get a project bankable. So we have a facility for that, which we co-fund to financial close with our partners, and from there we have construction equity fund, which we use to finance the capex of the project. We typically fund around 75%, 50 to 75%. It depends on the project. And in many cases, we have partners that come in for the remaining equity or debt portion. So in terms of our projects in Climate Investor One, we have various projects throughout those three regions that I mentioned that are under construction. I'll move a little more quickly through this slide and into the next one, but you'll see we've been successful in bringing a number of projects, wind, solar in Asia, and also hydro and wind and solar within Africa. And we have several projects in Latin America now that are under construction. Run River Hydro, solar. Where I'll speak more about today is Climate Investor 2, which has a wider remit in terms of what we can invest in, and looking at how we can bring impact to the water and waste space. Again, across our three regions, we have more projects here that are in development, and more of those are now moving into construction. But I'll just kind of zero in on those that maybe have a waste to value or a waste to energy component. And you'll see actually they make up quite a substantial portion of our portfolio. So going from right to left, we have projects in the Philippines and Thailand, India, which are using various feedstocks either for biomass or anaerobic digestion, upgrading that to biomethane, in some cases municipal solid waste as well, in terms of our RDF, and then generating steam into power. In Africa, we are engaged in South Africa with Bio2What on the Bronkhorstspruit project for the upgrading of the existing project there, and then the expansion, which is currently under construction. Elsewhere on the continent, we're working in Uganda on a biomass project there, and in the same also in Ivory Coast with agricultural waste. We have another anaerobic digestion project in Brazil, which is I hope to become public soon, which again is taking various feedstocks into an anaerobic digestion process, biogas to biomethane, and then other value products. So in terms of our journey, I think when we originally set out on this fund, I don't think there was the expectation that waste energy would play such a strong role, but it definitely does. And from that, I think we've had a lot of experience, positive and challenging. which I'll come on to now in this kind of main part of the presentation. So I think where I would start, and I think this was something that I came to, is most of my background was before this in more traditional renewables, mainly wind projects. And for those who come from that into waste energy, the awakening you have very quickly is that they are not, there are similarities, but they're not comparable. There are really many more things that you need to be anticipating, both in your development stage and looking forward to construction and operations. There are many more skill sets, many more competencies that you need in this type of process project. So I imagine there's some head nods on the call. So from here on, it's mainly my personal opinion. There are many directions I could have taken this. I thought what I would do is set out what I thought were the key challenges, and maybe three buckets that these fall into, in terms of, again, securing this project finance. So obviously there are usual project development challenges that you have, which are common across all projects. I tried to focus on those that I felt were more salient for biogas. So beginning first with the long-term feedstock offtake. This is relevant for many types of power projects, if you're using coal or other biomass, but I think for many traditional renewables, obviously this is taken for granted in some ways. The sun rises, the wind blows, the rivers usually run. In this case, every day you need to be managing your feedstock, and for a lender, this can be a challenging thing to get their head around in terms of a long-term offtake, because these can be quite challenging to secure. It's not saying they're not possible, but I would say this is probably one of the first areas where you can run into challenges. Also in this stage, as you are going further with your feedstock profile, is the upfront cost that you need to put into engineering. I think I've seen many projects that has put a lot of thought into the concept, but there's quite a bit between the concept and the front end engineering, and then from there to the detailed engineering, and much of that needs to be explored prior to financial close, prior to financing. And this can also be a challenge for developers, given that it's quite a high cost. So there needs to be an appreciation of that, a respect of that, and also a planning for it in your development expenditure. Another thing that, and I'll make some generalizations about lenders and financiers, and I hope you'll forgive me if some of those are it might be a bit unfair, but I would say it's common that it's nice to see a neat solution when it comes to contracting, and a single EPC wrap would be ideal in terms of a contractor taking much of that risk. And as an owner, you obviously want to move risk off your desk that you're not ready to manage. That said, in this space, there are, I would say, few opportunities for this, particularly in emerging markets, maybe or emerging industries where there's less track record. And so in this case, thinking around contracting needs to be a bit more nuanced often. I think that there's also sometimes questions around how much you lean into experience that you have locally. Obviously, that's going to be more beneficial in many ways. But at the same time, to what extent do you need an offshore technology provider, an OEM, to be involved in your project? And that, again, takes weighing up in terms of the pros and cons. Digestate. I think for me, this is a standout part of these projects. Just to dive quickly back into my experience, waste energy is quite close to my heart. I'm a civil engineer by training, and part of what motivated me to go into it was actually learning about waste to energy, and from there I did my dissertation actually focusing on digestate. So I'm a bit of a hobby horse sometimes when it comes to this part, but it is an interesting part of a component of this project, and I think sometimes it can be it can be a great benefit in terms of what it can be used for, the value it can bring, both from a climate perspective, but also from a commercial perspective. It can also be a great liability and be a cost. So it can very quickly switch sides, double-edged sword in that way. So for me as well, during the development stage, this is a key thing to be able to understand, and also to set expectation on, especially for your financial base case. Finally, operation. So again, a nice, neat solution would be to have a single operator. Maybe that's even your EPC stays on to operate your plant. This again depends on the ownership structure of the project. But I would say again, that there's limited availability of these types of options. Not to say they're not out there, but again, when beginning the process to bank your project, it's good to anticipate this early in terms of what is the strategy. Do you go out and really look for this single operator? Do you try and outsource, or do you go the other way and try and have a strategy to build a team, which then, as the owner, runs the project? Both are very possible. They just need to be planned for. So again, combining maybe these thoughts, hopefully not too garbled, into kind of three main areas where I see where I would suggest to put the most focus is on design and feedstock, contracting, and then operational readiness. And I think more thought and planning that goes into this, be it slow, can lead to fast implementation and more effective later. So avoiding run-on costs during construction, or challenges during operation. And again, I'll just give a note here that these are my opinions. It's always going to be project specific, so I'm being quite general. But I hope maybe there's some points in here that resonate. But also, again, very welcome to take opinions after if you disagree. There's no one way. So around design and feedstock, questions that maybe I come to and that I think maybe are good to think about, whether you're approaching this as a lender or as a developer, even as a contractor or just an interested party, when you're thinking about when you're designing and preparing for the feedstock profile of the project. So, and as I mentioned, those long-term supply agreements, they're usually quite hard to sign pre-construction. Many waste off-takers or many waste producers who have this available, they're not looking to sign a 20-year offtake. Likely, that's quite a commitment. Often it might be year to year, maybe 2, maybe 5. So when you're putting this to a lender and they go to their credit committee, how do they show, yes, there's enough feedstock to run this plant through its operational life, which is likely 20, 25 years. It's again quite unusual, I would say, not impossible to have a single feedstock coming in. You will likely have multiple feedstocks. So when you're designing your plant, either the sizing of it, your expectations for how much will be produced, the volumes of each type of feedstock, these are very difficult to have exact at the very start. So they're going to fluctuate. So what is your strategy, or what is the strategy going to be? And for changes in this from when you achieve financial close to when the project actually starts, and then going on from there. I mentioned it earlier about the cost of front-end engineering. These are critical in terms of how much, in terms of the layout, the sizing of your plant, how much you'll produce, depending on what products you hope to sell, how much of those can you expect to put in your base case. So you need to do this work, but what is your strategy to keep those costs under control? Because as many engineers know, they can keep going, and that obviously comes at a cost. So there's always a way to tweak a solution. So when are you going to be done? And I think this is important to think about up front. There are various ways to control those costs, but strategy or a thought is needed before going into that stage. And maybe this seems like a simple one, but I think it can be underestimated as to what you will sell. What are you putting as your revenue lines? Is it just electricity, biogas into a CHP? Is it biomethane? Is it other byproducts such as CO2 or fertilizer? These are. It's not that these can't be sold and someone won't buy them, but often a lender will require more about proving that those can be sold, that there's a market, and again the offtake for that. So you then have both sides of the project. You have that conundrum of how you're going to get your feedstock and then where you're selling your products. Very common issues in project finance, but again, I think with waste to energy, there's a bit of difference given the day-to-day change. in your plant operations. So just some thoughts in terms of risk mitigation I've seen that can be done. So with your feedstock suppliers, if you cannot sign them up for a long time, get as close as you can in terms of MOUs, commitments, template agreements. Obviously, if you can sign, that's best case. If there's multiple suppliers, which there likely will be, understanding their business plans, their strength as a partner. This involves a bit of maybe outside work, but also engagement with those partners. And obviously, there's a limit to what you can do with a large corporate. They're not going to open up their books for you. But the extent that work can be done to give comfort to a lender as to where the feedstock is coming, I think any little bit helps. So I think put as much effort into that as possible. Coming to the second question here about the feedstock profile, I think these wider feedstock supply studies, not just looking at what your waste streams are, but what alternate waste streams are and those available in the region, how far away those are, what are the implications of transport of those feedstock, who's going to do it, gate fees and so forth associated with those. Really important, again, to give a wider story, a wider picture, and also as a strategy in the future, if a factory does shut down for a reason, or if there's a crop failure, where will you turn? So I think, again, important for understanding that, but also what are on the more conservative side of that, where could a competition come in terms of someone else wanting that feedstock? If you're charging for it, will they take it for free? I think this, in the same way, when you design other projects and you anticipate the resource impacts, this is also critical. More time spent up front studying your own feedstock, obviously key. I think it's good to get your OEM involved in this, as long as doing an independent assessment. Really, the more eyes that you have on understanding the calorific value of your feedstock, and what it's going to generate, again, feeds into more knowledge around your profile and more flexibility into the future. I'm conscious of various plants that started out with an idea of what they're going to use, and that changed over time, and it was very much informed by the science. So in this way, this can be quite comforting to a lender, I would say, because it's a bit more black and white of what something can produce. Easy to say in terms of budgeting for something, but it is, I would say, it pays back in terms of budgeting for engineering costs and suitable advisors to bring that experience into the project. Obviously, overspend is very possible, but I think if this can be spent wisely and sufficiently, it really does add value to the project and bring confidence as to your business case. Again, coming back to how to control engineering costs, when you decide to push forward on certain engineering costs, should be driven by certain prerequisites, and for me, 3 of those are essentially what your feedstock is likely to be, and there's some back and forth, there's some optioneering that needs to be done in this, but to the extent possible, if that can be more or less locked in terms of where your site is, what you're going to be selling, where your feedstock's coming from, again, will help keep your engineering costs low and deliver more value for what you spend. Another thought is, if that development funding is lower, or that's less available cash, is to bring in partners, who are willing to put some skin in the game, get more involved, and also see the value in the project and what it brings later. Pros and cons, trade-offs to this. But again, it can be a nice way to fill gaps in technical competence within the working team. And again, in terms of giving confidence to a lender, knowing that there's a partner in there who has done this before, perhaps, can really bring a lot of comfort. And finally, do not underestimate the challenges of valorizing certain byproducts, in particular digestate. Oh, I won't say anymore. I think I said I wouldn't say anymore. I won't say anymore, but it could be a challenge. All right, moving on to contracting. Some questions and thoughts here to kind of ponder on. This is leading from the last slide, and your partner for your technology, unless you are the technology originator yourself, a bit rare. When are you going to commit to that partner? Is this part of a tender? Is this something early on where you engage with someone? There needs to be a bit of a story here in terms of how you choose someone, but also commitment. Lenders will want to know why you picked someone, why they're the right firm to be with you, whether that's a contractor, whether it's an OEM. Something to decide, to think on as to when you make that decision. I mentioned earlier about the desire for an EPC wrap. If that's not possible, how do you reduce that risk and the integration during implementation? If it is an industry where there is less experience, how do you still benefit from skills in the industry? That's going to lower your costs by using a contractor locally. It's probably also going to reduce certain risks from contractors coming in from outside that jurisdiction. So how do you make that balance work? As I mentioned before, around valorizing products, there are risks with this, but also there's various nuances in the costs, and how do you reduce those risks before you finance? To what extent can you anticipate potential impacts of going after these different products? All right, again, my thoughts. So when picking a technical partner, if you once you decide when and who, I think very early on decide who's doing what in terms of the scope. Is that partner going to oversee all of this? How are decisions going to be made? It's very easy for someone to put their hands on the wheel and take it off very quickly when risks increase. So I think that's so key when joining with a technical partner. I think this also makes it clear how and when you get to a fixed price if that partner is providing equipment or contracting, and also how much additional help or technical competence you need within the team. Because more of a, I would say, on the finance side, but it's relevant for the conflicts of interest that come up. Again, pros and cons. If that partner is going to invest in your project, in the project, if they're going to put that in kind, or if they're going to put in cash, I get a conversation now very early. To what extent are they in the project? Are they providing engineering and equipment, and they're getting paid, or are they in the ownership team? Two very different hats. And if they are going to wear the ownership hat, how are you going to manage the governance of that? It can be done, and it can be done very successfully, and it can have great benefits. It's just, as with many things, it's in the execution. Again, continuing with the EPC wrap aspect, is my starting point usually now on waste energy projects is not to assume that we will get a wrap. I think that is quite challenging. Many contractors are less keen on the risks. The project sizes sometimes don't warrant that, or they're less interesting to large EPC contractors. But then the focus really is finding the right contractors to allocate risk to, and also anticipating what premiums would you pay if you do maybe lump more things together as certain packages. Maybe looking particularly at South Africa, I would say there is now, from my opinion, there's quite a few contractors that can build these plants, biogas plants. There's some equipment that at the moment is not manufactured there, or not manufactured in South Africa, so it needs to be imported. And the focus then is, for me, on that front end engineering, getting the sense of who's responsible for what, who will be paying for what, and also who is fixing ahead of financial close their costs, or are some of these going to be open-ended? I think good news here for South Africa in that sense is that there's, for me, a competence. It's just a matter of doing the right diligence and best practice with engineering. And finally, to my last point there around products and others and import of equipment is spending a bit of money on advice on these topics. It's worthwhile. There's many good advisors within the country that have done this on comparable projects. And it just will help you anticipate costs prior to financial close that then don't pop up later and threaten your overall capex. Conscious of the time, so I'm going to move a little bit quicker through this section on operational readiness. And when I say operational readiness, it's that point after kind of leading up to commercial operation and thereafter, but in particular that transition from construction to operation. And so a question for me is often going back to that point in the previous slide of a single operator, is that your starting point? Are you looking for someone just to, in a way, hand the keys to and say, please drive this for me? Or are you going to build a team? And in both those cases, if it's your team, how do you bring in the right experience? There are definitely transferable skills and knowledge. If it's a service provider, can you find that? Can you find that one-stop shop, as we say? Or if you don't, to what will they cover and what needs to be covered by the owner? Again, those scope gaps are so key to identify early, both in terms of cost. Are they going to provide spare parts? Are they going to provide consumables? Or will they just tell you that you need spare parts and that you need to pay for them? These details need to be determined early. Digestate, coming back to it, every day, tens of tons are coming through your plant, liquid and solid. Solid is often a bit easier to transport, put in a truck, move somewhere. Liquid can be quite challenging, and you need to have the right tanks available to store. You need to move it relatively quickly. And if you're not moving that digestate quickly, it can have serious knock-on effects for your plants or environmental issues. So what is the plan? How you manage your digestate? Related to that, if you are going to sell it or if you're going to dispose of it, how are you going to show to your lenders, if it's a revenue stream, that you can get paid for that? Or is it an upside? It's easier if you say, well, we hope to sell this, and if we do, all the better. But if you're banking on that, a lot of work needs to be done in terms of making sure that digestate stays within a certain requirement. Will it be able to be used in the way that you're expecting from a regulatory perspective? Again, upfront thinking and planning. And finally, as feedstock flows into your plant, how do you make sure that it's meeting your expectations? How could it be contaminated? How would you catch that? What are the consequences? Again, questions you will likely receive from a lender, and for which there are answers, which I'll go into now. So for me, I think some ways to, especially for the first question, and actually for all of them, is to do your diligence by going to existing plants. They're out there. There's some in South Africa. There's various around the world. It depends how far you're willing to travel. If you have a technical partner, in particular, seeing their facilities, I think this is really worth the time in terms of understanding how it's done. What are their experiences? If it's an older plant, what were the challenges they experienced? Is it a single operator? Is it outsourced? What is their feedstock profile like? I think there's really good value in doing this type of site visit due diligence, either as the owner or as a contractor or even as a lender, just to understand how it works in practice. Again, in terms of good spend, I think having the right experience in operators, especially in anaerobic digestion, is worth that. This may require a bit of a hunt, a bit of a search. There's not a lot of this, so I would say it's again worth taking the time if you are building out your own team, or even if you're a single operator and you have someone looking over their shoulder. I think having someone who's done anaerobic digestion, in particular for a power plant, can really be beneficial. Come back to digestate. Until you know it's valuable, treat it with caution. It can be a liability. Spending time looking at your OPEX assumptions, everything from staff costs to spare parts and consumables, but also other aspects in terms of major maintenance. I think if you can take this into account, that you will be learning. So you need a maintenance reserve account, you need a contingency, even with a fully scoped EPC and a fully scoped O&M that's outsourced, it's very difficult to anticipate all the costs that come with it. There will likely be variations. There will likely be something that maybe you didn't catch, especially if it's the first plant. So budgeting this and having that informed by a technical advisor or a partner, another operator that you meet, really valuable. And finally, in terms of that, two final points. One is on the feedstock. Consider budgeting for lab equipment, for on-site equipment, so that you can test feedstock, just a sample. This is really useful in many ways. One, for educating the team about the ongoing calorific value of your feedstock. Is it what you expected? Is it changing? And is it possible to see contaminants? You have, tens of tons of, even hundreds of tons of digestate of feedstock coming into your plant every day. You're not going to test all of that. So, but still, doing sampling, doing assessments here and there, important for potential shutdowns that could come from issues that you have in the plant from contaminants. But also, if you can see ways to optimize your plant and improve it. If your gas production is a bit low, why is that? And having a bit of budget for this, I think, can really pay back again extra from there. And finally, from a contractual perspective with the feedstock suppliers, is building in some form of consequence if they do provide feedstock that is outside the specification. It's a completely reasonable thing. And I think there's lots of examples of how that can be enforceable, but also how that can be drafted. All right, I'll finish here with just sort of four my main lessons learned. Maybe summarize some of those points I've just made. The first is people. I think people run projects, they develop them, they build them, they operate them. Need the right people. And I think without the right people, you won't be able to get the most out of your project, and there's a higher risk that risks will be missed, and they'll come to fruition. Digestate. Back to this. It's a liability before it's an opportunity, in my opinion. Enough attention needs to be given to this early during development, in terms of what it means, in terms of managing it, and if you're going to make money from it, how you're going to do that. In terms of your feedstock management, obviously, maybe some people would actually put this as number one. It is so key. It's not to be underestimated that every day the plant needs to be anticipating what's potentially coming in and out. And if you are able to do that testing and optimization, you can reduce costs, major maintenance, but also improve production. And finally, picking the right partners, the right contractors, the right service providers, find ones with experience. I think there's a lot of comparable industries, but I would say anaerobic digestion has enough idiosyncrasies that it's really worth finding a contractor, a partner, service providers that have done the work before. All right. Well, thank you, Tsang. Thank you all. I'll end my presentation there, and I think questions will come at the very end. So looking forward to any of those then.
Great. No, thank you so much, John. That was a very incredible presentation. I'm sure that everybody learned a lot. I can even see lots of people have been asking questions in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to those as soon as we are done with the next presentation. So yeah, thanks again, John. So our next speaker is Maudene van Rooyen, a specialist in power and sustainable solutions at Standard Bank South Africa. Maudene plays a key role in helping businesses finance and implement renewable and sustainable energy solutions ranging from solar PV and battery storage to biomass and biogas. With over 7 years of experience at Standard Bank, she has been instrumental in developing financing models for embedded generation projects, particularly in the agricultural and commercial sectors. Her work is not only helping companies cut costs and emissions, but also future-proofing their operations against load shedding and rising energy prices. Please join me in welcoming Maudene van Rooyen.
Thanks so much, Tsang, for the warm welcome, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start sharing my presentation, and then we can get right into it. Cool. You can still hear me clearly, Tusang?
Yes, we can see your presentation and we can hear you clearly.
Perfect. So I'm a specialist in power and sustainable solutions at Standard Bank, like the song indicated. And just to give you context, I fit into the segment of business and commercial banking, a segment just below corporate and investment banking. So we literally look after the SME market. So we take care of a lot of businesses from a volumes perspective. And it's businesses turning anything over from R1 million per annum all the way to R1 billion per annum. And then thereafter, these businesses obviously are mostly listed and then fit into corporate and investment banking. So I thought we will start off the presentation by firstly looking at sustainability and how technologies such as biogas contribute to sustainability. I think it's important for us to firstly build resilience through the technology and then understand the landscape from that point of view before zooming into the specific technology type being biogas. So if we look at sustainability, there are mainly three pillars that drive sustainability. The first one is from a social perspective. So it really touches on the human effects of economic systems and how it should not impact people negatively. From an economic perspective, it touches on profits and how making profits impact the physical environment that we live in. And thirdly, from an environmental perspective, I think we all understand this very well that whatever we do should not impact our environment negatively. So, looking at sustainability that has become a buzzword globally, it is one word, but it has so much more meaning behind it. And to springboard us into this presentation, I thought I'll just kick us off with that and why sustainability has become so important in particular for a bank like Standard Bank. What are the main drivers of sustainability? So the top 10 asset managers worldwide holds more than 34% of assets under management. And if we think about it, what is the main purpose of an asset manager? Is to mitigate risk. So the question is, how do they mitigate against climate failure? They can't, right? And therefore, prevention is better than cure. And hence, that's why we have seen such a great uptake around sustainability as well as ESG activism. The second driver is then financial return. So, being in the sector for the past 7 years, which is energy and infrastructure within the bank, I have seen on a daily basis that businesses that embrace sustainability, that contribute towards it, outperform businesses that do not from a financial perspective. So, that in itself is also a driver locally and internationally why we've seen such a interest in sustainability. Lastly, I think another driver that I need to explain is that sustainability has become a fiduciary duty, and we've seen sustainability being incorporated into many businesses' strategies. Standard Bank in particular as well. So we have a dedicated team that purely looks at sustainability from a client perspective, as well as internally how our organization basically contributes to it. You'll see that we annually produce a society report and we really unpack our contribution towards sustainability. I'm also pleased to let you know, I'm sure you've seen on social media, that Business and Commercial Banking has launched a sustainability academy yesterday that really also helps our clients to understand the space better and to unpack how their business can contribute. If we look at some examples from an ESG perspective, so we all understand that sustainability is one thing, but practically we look at the ESG framework. And if we can look at some examples of how we could contribute and make our difference from an ESG perspective, it is projects like cutting emissions, lowering our energy usage, proper physical waste disposal, reducing water wastage, sourcing products from fair organizations, and diversity and fairness in the workforce. So, what these examples actually indicate is that no matter how small the business is, no matter how big the business is, there is a place for each of these businesses to play when it comes to ESG. Let's think about a small accounting firm. Yes, water wastage and energy consumption might not be on top of the agenda, but fairness and diversity in the workforce definitely. If we look at a manufacturing business, reducing water wastage and cutting emissions will obviously have more materiality than the example that I just made. So being the biggest bank in Africa and being in the segment of business and commercial banking, we have came to realize that we need to create awareness amongst these businesses when it comes to ESG, because like I said, there's a role for each and every one of us to play. If we look at more examples, so basically Google has pledged to operate carbon free by 2030. Walmart stores has pledged to reach zero emissions by 2040. And I want to pause here once again, looking at this statement from an SME lens. So what happens to the small logistic business that does transportation for Walmart stores within South Africa if they do not become compliant with the statement? It really means that at some point there will be no relevance for them in providing that service to Walmart, because the product and the service offering do not align with the objectives of the Walmart group. So for that reason as well, we create as much awareness as we can. Then Morgan Stanley has pledged net zero finance emissions by 2050. Similar to Standard Bank as well, this is a financial institution. So as much as physical cutting of emissions is important, financed emissions is becoming just as relevant and critical. So when it comes to, just trying to put on my laser. When it comes to solving for projects in the space, we see the most contribution being made by looking at projects in the water, waste, and power space. So biogas touches mostly on the waste and power subsectors, but we will obviously unpack that later. And although various technologies exist within these sectors, if you think about power, we have solar, we have hydro, we have biogas, we have biomass, and there are various recycling technologies out there. From a water perspective, you get water harvesting, recycling, water efficiency technologies, but clients still struggle to execute projects in the space. And about 4 years ago, the segment of the bank asked the question, but why are most of our clients not already actively contributing towards these sectors and then ultimately sustainability? And the feedback that we got is that there are three main challenges that really our clients struggle with. And the first one is technical. And I think this is obviously in order of priority. So there are many solutions, opinions, and sometimes conflicting solutions out there in the market. And there are service providers that are causing damage to the industry's reputation. I think solar is a good example of that, biogas to an extent as well, but that is what most of our clients struggle with, is when it comes to the actual technical solution, they do not have the know-how to basically navigate that process. Secondly, from a legal and regulatory perspective, so when replacing a utility service within South Africa, we know that there are certain laws and regulations that have to be followed, which often takes a lot of time and effort and causes delays in the process. The last one is from a funding perspective. So not just talking from a Standard Bank perspective, but non-Standard Bank clients also indicated that there are high levels of complexity involved when funding projects in the space. It's an asset that still has to be built. There's a construction period and it's different components coming together, making the outcome that we require. And that is where clients grapple when it comes to funding. I think we have come a long way in this regard. Private equity, commercial banks, there are various options and solutions available. And towards the end of this presentation, I'll obviously unpack Standard Bank's offering in this regard. What are the global and local drivers for green energy, which I think biogas obviously contributes to in the developing power sector landscape? From a global perspective, to summarize it, it's purely driven by decentralization, where unreliable utilities like what we have in South Africa contributes to decentralization, and then also favorable economics of the technology types, right? The second driver is decarbonization. I think we all understand that there's a big drive globally to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, and many businesses are becoming under ESG pressures. From a digitization perspective, this is also a driver for green energy globally. We all understand what happens if we digitize a market or a product. We enjoy market efficiencies and economies of scale. So these three main drivers globally is what we've seen from a green energy perspective. Then this brings us to the energy trilemma. So what our clients normally experience when embarking on this journey under the power landscape or the energy landscape is the energy trilemma. And it's really broken down into three elements, which is energy security. So our clients often aspire to having a solution that really helps them to be independent from the grid. The second one is from an energy equity perspective. So many of our clients aspire for a cheaper solution than what they currently have on site. And then with environmental stability in mind, our clients really also opt for solutions that are sustainable and would not bring more harm to the environment. So yes, solar PV is a front runner across all three of these elements. But I think biogas is still getting there, where from a cheaper option perspective, it might not be able to compete to the grid. But I think there are other elements like waste management that come into play when looking at the energy trilemma. Understanding a client's journey to commercial sustainable energy. So this is a roadmap that has become our gospel, where we ask clients to start this journey with an energy audit. Whether the client has the goal of implementing solar, biogas, hydro, it always starts, or it should start with the energy audit, because knowledge is power. If I understand what's happening within my organization from an energy perspective, I then know how to navigate the process. The second step would then be, once we've gathered the data and we've done an audit, we then see where we need to apply energy efficiency mechanisms. And we've seen clients getting a saving between 30 and 50% on their existing bill by just looking at optimization and efficiency, not bringing in the technology as yet. And this could be anything like power factor correction, managing the load, being more efficient, and just putting in, for example, from a lighting perspective, LED lights instead of the traditional lights. Basically, boilers and chillers, that also takes up a lot of energy. And especially where clients need steam generation, not maintaining that can also contribute to unnecessary expenditure. So we actually have a saying within the team that the kilowatt hour that I don't have to use as a client is the kilowatt hour that's the cheapest. So hence why we motivate not only our clients, but also our service providers to take on this approach. So that then gets us to then where we managing our energy within the business, and we as optimized as possible. Now I think let's get into biogas as a technology type. So for context, once again, in the energy space, in the renewable space, within the segment that I am in within Standard Bank, we welcome all technology types. So we have experience with solar. Solar is obviously our volume business. for the reasons that I've indicated earlier. We have done hydro projects at the scale, biogas as well as biomass. So, but for the purpose of today's discussion and time, we'll stick to biogas. So I think there is no doubt that the generation of biogas through anaerobic digestion is one of many renewable energy solutions which can assist in the transition to net zero, which I think not only Standard Bank but many businesses aspire to. Um, the advantages of biogas is obviously that it is clean, it's a renewable source of energy, and with things like basically CBAM emerging, this helps a lot of our clients, especially in the agricultural space, and those are the clients that literally export their products. So it also creates a reduction of pollution in the soil as well as water. Um, and I think what makes it also viable is the organic fertilizer that we get out of the process. Disadvantages. So there's limited advancements in terms of technology compared to other technology types such as solar. Um, Feedstock may contain impurities. So the presentation earlier, I think, was very clear on the importance of feedstock. And then production may be impacted by temperature, right? And already we are finding ourselves in a climate change environment. So for the purposes of a case study, um, I thought, let me touch on what worked. What worked for the project that we financed in Standard Bank, instead of focusing on, what may not work for a project within the audience. So we financed a 9,000 cubic meter digester within the province of Limpopo. The client was in the or is in the agriculture sector. It is quite a big dairy, and we actually see the products on the shelves of the likes of Woolworths, Checkers, Spar. And what really worked for this project is not only the feedstock supply, but also the feedstock management and how it was collected. So firstly, this client was the supplier of his own feedstock. So from a reliability perspective, it already ticked that box because the farmer knows exactly what he's feeding the cows and can then definitely take account for the quality of the feedstock. Um, there was a cost that we were trying to avoid by the biogas, and it was to really heat up the boilers that then generate steam within the dairy. And there was avoided cost of 2.8 million rand. Um, what really helped the bank as well was that the client was contracting with a credible technical partner with a very good track record with past projects that we could reference much bigger than the one our client was investing in. Um, so the bank could then bring a viable funding solution to the table that really works for the project and for the customer. And then what helped as well is that they were low counterparty risk. Our client was a well-performing customer. It was a commercial customer. And like I said, the client has good off-takers for the product, blue chip actually to be specific. Um, so Tusang indicated I only have 20 minutes. So I'll run through the final slide very quickly. But how do we fund these projects within Standard Bank? So there's two funding models. The first one is like the case study I just explained, where our client can leverage his own balance sheet for the project. And the project will obviously be to the benefit of the business. So we can fund up to 10 years, up to 100% loan to value, and we sometimes use an asset finance backed product, or we can make use of unsecured lending, which is basically a term loan. Conditions here is that where the basically the property is not owned, we do have arrangements where we look at the leases and we understand. what the ownership structure looks like around the property, where the asset would sit. But I think short-term insurance is a non-negotiable because it is asset finance we're proposing. The second solution is then contract-backed funding, where a IPP might come in and invest in biogas on behalf of our client, and our client becomes then the off-taker in that arrangement. So we normally fund a special purpose vehicle in that regard that will house the asset. We can fund up to 10 years. However, we'll need a 30% equity contribution from the IPP because we perceive the structure as more riskier, right? There's a third party involved where the cash flow actually starts. From a conditions perspective, we will look at cession of the income, guarantees from shareholders, and then trying to basically achieve step-in rates should something go wrong between the off-taker and the IPP. So we mostly see these structures in a solar PV battery storage scenario, but there could potentially be an IPP for biogas in the audience. So I thought I'll just add this structure as an option as well. But the case study I referred to earlier was for own use, and we basically leverage the existing business balance sheet to fund the project. It's going well. It's been implemented for over a year, and we have a client that's very happy with the outcome of the project. So I know there is the perception, especially within the South African market, that biogas is risky. We have many failed projects within the country, but I think if we really look at what worked for this project, if you are sure of your feedstock supply and management, you have a credible service provider, and you can come up with a funding structure that works for the project, there is an outcome that can be achieved that is successful. So that's it from my side, Tusang. I'm not sure if there's any questions for me. Thanks.